What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Blitz Sports Media here. I'm with the Draft Dome today. We are talking Falcons football, all 7 rounds. Now, the Falcons don't have a first round pick this year, and they're trying to regain their form, make the playoffs this upcoming year. Clint, tell me about the Falcons and what we could be expecting, between their draft process this season.
I would piggyback it off of kind of the theme of free agency thus far, and that's been new GM Ian Cunningham inadvertently giving his opinion on his predecessor Terry Fontenot's management of the 23 to 53 spots on the roster. Really been a depth free agency to not have big spending money, to only have those 5 draft picks going into the draft, anticipating a big 2027 as far as seventh most cap space in the league, and now upwards of around 10 draft picks.
Yep.
So more so building that out, and that theme is the message of adding a Tua Tagovailoa, adding a Samson Abuakam, adding Sidney Brown in recent days in the pick swap with the Eagles as far as a secondary depth move, some linebackers and Christian Harris and Channing Tindall. That's really been more of the theme versus flipping starters in this free agency, but that was pretty anticipated. So heading into the draft, would really imagine knowing they've got to hit it hard on day 2. You mentioned not having the first round pick. Also don't have a 5th round pick. Use that to move up to get Xavier Watts last year. We're damn sure feeling good about that. Tied for second in the league in interceptions. But no, he's going to have to get a little creative. Though I don't think this will be very much of a trade back draft. Would be nice to have some potential there. But it's pretty easy to key on about 2 or 3 specific spots with those first 2 or 3 picks that I imagine they'll be looking at along with best player available.
Yeah, and obviously the situation that looms over this team is what's going on with James Pierce this offseason. What have you heard on your end on his outlook heading into this year and in the future with the Falcons?
I think it's really been following some legal discourse as far as Falcons haven't commented on it a ton. I think they're leaning more on the we're going to wait and see thing, innocent until proven guilty along those guidelines. Did have one charge dropped recently. We'll see. It's the kind of thing, as far as my opinion on it, from a personnel standpoint, not a personal standpoint. If they come in tomorrow and say that they cut him, I'm going to say, okay, cool. If they come in tomorrow and say he got suspended for half the year and he's on the team, I'm going to say, okay, cool. I don't have feelings about it from a personnel standpoint. Obviously, 10.5 sacks as a rookie. Used that first round pick last year, traded into the first round, used the first round of this year. So from that standpoint, obviously want that production coming back. With some of the additions they made, I mentioned Ebukam, who they added, Azeez Ojulari as well, former Georgia Bulldog. I think those moves were made more subsequent to letting Arnold Ebiketie walk in free agency. Leonard Floyd as a veteran's likely not coming back. I think that was more replacing those guys and anticipating an uptick in role for Jalen Walker. But we'll see. I mean, that's about all I could damn add to it at this point.
Yeah, it is kind of a mess over there, and the quarterback situation.
We're used to it. It's okay. We're used to that. Yeah.
Yeah, so the quarterback situation, you got Tua, Michael Penix over there. Honestly, I thought this was one of the better moves of free agency. You get Tua on a low risk deal. Penix, who is coming off another significant injury, you have no clue what his timetable is. And clearly, with the current state of the Falcons roster, it's not like they're in a massive rebuild or a retool. They have a bunch of players, on the offensive side of the ball specifically that are really talented. Bijan Robinson, arguably the best running back in football. They bring back Kyle Pitts on the franchise tag, looking to, work out that deal. Drake London as well. There's talent on this offensive side of the ball. And in this new scheme under Kevin Stefanski, who knows what's going to happen. So I thought, honestly, like the Tua signing was one of my favorite moves of the offseason. Low risk, high reward. And if it doesn't work out with Tua this year, he's gone after the year. So I think with that, it just gives them a lot of flexibility at the quarterback position that they didn't really have last season. You have a Kirk Cousins who isn't really what he once was. Michael Penix dealt with injuries last year. What are your thoughts on, just the quarterback situation entering the upcoming season?
Some simple math, really. Not to sound like a smart aleck, but I really do believe the thought process with Tua is 1 + 1 = 1 as far as this season. It's like
Yeah.
Penix and Tua, and I'm not a soothsayer, but they're not going to both stay healthy for 18 games. It's not going to happen. Try and get through the 18 games with both of them, and also set yourself up to have your answer at the end of the year. Like I said, heading into all that cap space and free agency. And there's going to have to be some extension work done. So it's not going to stay the same, obviously, but there's going to be plenty of money to be spent. All those draft picks and what is anticipated, keyword, not to be the person that says every next class is better, but anticipated more quarterback volume as far as round one.
Yep.
If Penix doesn't have it this year, can't stay healthy, goes and knock on wood that I'm sitting on right now, goes and has another major injury, Tua comes in and takes it over or something, they're going to move in another direction. Simple math as well. And the fact Tua is a $1.3 million deal. That money equates to about a 6th, 7th round pick in terms of what you're paying. Wasn't going to be that kind of upside with anyone in this draft with limited picks there. Put themselves in multiple directions to get their answer as far as going into 2027, have some competent bodies this year, and competition for Penix in general. I mean, there was a message sent in this to him that it is going to be a competition on his timeline. I like the move. I mean, I went into this free agency knowing as far as the vet minimum quarterback with experience, they could go on the discount. They were going to do the Tua experiment. Kyler Murray, who I think was destined for the Vikings about the whole time.
Yeah, 100% destined for the Vikings.
Joe Flacco, so it was one of those things too where I wouldn't have felt any more like strong about any of the other options. It was kind of pick your flavor. They go with Tua, and I get it. The lefty, scheme fit, the experience that he does have, not shocking, and I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. Everybody's just fine with it. It just makes sense. It's not going to kill the Falcons long term, and it gives them at least one of the two quarterbacks that'll be healthy for an 18-game stretch, like you mentioned. So, without further ado, let's get into this mock draft here. As you guys can see, we're on the Blitz Sports Media mock draft simulator on our site. All 7 rounds free. You can trade. You can do all that good stuff. Don't have to pay for it. There's nothing behind a paywall here. So we're going to hop right into this with the Atlanta Falcons and get this draft started. Obviously, we're going to have to wait a minute just because the Falcons do not have that first round pick. So unfortunately, the top end guys are going to be gone by the time we get to the second round. But hopefully there's some high-end talent available.
I just wrapped up a 7-round mock draft with content creators from all the teams, X mock 26, and there was a good bit of waiting, especially with some trading back I did where I was sitting up like, damn, man, this is boring. I'm tired of waiting around. So, but no, we got there.
You got interesting options here. You got Caleb Banks, who has been one of the players that has been falling down draft boards. He got injured at the combine. His honestly draft stock, he could be a guy that goes middle to the end of round 2 now. You got Jacob Rodriguez at linebacker here in this situation. A player I've seen mocked to Atlanta a lot, D'Angelo Pons. Is that an option they will be considering in this spot at all?
It's funny. I just mentioned that mock draft I just finished over on Twitter. I did have a trade back from 48 to 53, gained a pick, and I did walk out with D'Angelo Pons. I think it is definitely for consideration. It's just going to be a matter of, do Ian Cunningham and company view him as a slot-only cornerback? Billy Bowman really excelled in his 6 starts there last year. But another question as far as injury, had a bad Achilles tear. Got to see his timeline. Got to see if he loses a step there, how they project that. I mentioned earlier the pick swap acquiring Sidney Brown. I think that is more of a nickel depth addition than even safety. I mean, can do both. I wonder, if they think he can be a boundary or not. I took him with that intention in that mock draft I just completed. I'd mix it up a little bit here, though, and take somebody else having just done that. Looking at the names you've got up here at the top, I mean, Caleb Banks, if he's there, the need really on the defensive line is for a traditional nose tackle. and more, for his size to be more of that. He's really played more of a 3-tech role for the Gators. So that one would be interesting to see how they view that with who they already have. Jacob Rodriguez, and even lower down, you had one other linebacker I saw, Josiah Trotter. One of those athletic, competent bodies to throw in there with the Divine Diablo and some of the additions. But having added Christian Harris and Channing Tindall there, I don't think they use a second rounder on that. Corners, haven't mentioned Pons. Do they like somebody like a Keith Abney? Malachi Lawrence is an interesting one out of Central Florida.
I've seen that mock to them a little bit too.
99th percentile athlete, 6'4", 253. Now, yeah, if you and I were doing this right now and you told me that they just cut James Pierce, I'd be saying that's probably, as far as the archetype, the closest you're going to get to it.
Yeah, agreed.
For immediate juice. So that is interesting. I would say for doing this exercise, act as if Pierce is still on the team, considering he is. So having said all of that, I don't think they'd be able to pass up on Banks. And that's leaning on Ian Cunningham. Has been a man of his word thus far in terms of his philosophy. He comes in and preaches about needing more draft picks, that he's never going to have 5 or fewer like we do this year. Proceeds to go get 3 comp picks for next year in a stronger 2027 draft. That was true. For him to preach bringing in competition, he does that with Tua in terms of Penix. For him to preach the depth and needing to upgrade the depth, like I said, that 23 to 53, that's been the complete motto of free agency. So having said all that, he lastly in that philosophy talked about the emphasis on the big men on the offensive and defensive line and best player available. Well, that's the biggest dude on that board, and that's the best player available. So we'll stick with that and go with Banks.
Caleb Banks is he feels like a guy that is either going to be an absolute superstar in this league or just one of the biggest busts. Like his profile at 6'6", the way he runs, the size he has, he could be a absolute game changer on the defensive line, to where we haven't seen a guy at that size move like that since Chris Jones for the Chiefs. And now obviously Chris Jones is heading off, later in his career. Caleb Banks has that type of upside, but there's a lot of question marks with Banks. He hasn't been on the field much in college. He has a lot of injury concerns. He truly is a great flyer in the early second round. And I think there's going to be a lot of teams that look at him out there and say, in the Falcons case, it's a little bit different, but we already had our first round pick. We've already made a selection there. Why don't we go take a guy that, is truly a top 15 talent in this draft early in the second round and see what happens? I mean, the Falcons are a team where you don't have that first round pick, but they could find a guy like that with top 15 upside early in the second round at that size. I feel like with that draft positioning, it just makes a ton of sense for both of those sides. And, with this board, what are you thinking with some of these guys available at this point? And if you want to go filter by position, let me know.
No, I think you got enough good names right there, sticking to some best player available. The ones that jump out at me quickly, Skylar Bell, receiver out of UConn. In terms of statistics, was top 3 in every major category this year, about a 1,200-yard receiver, 100-catch guy. To bring him in that receiver 2, receiver 3 lineup with Jahan Dotson, you just added in free agency from the Eagles, behind Drake London, ahead of depth addition Alameda Zaccheaus. That's a nice one. I'm really high on Antonio Williams, receiver out of Clemson as well. Very nuanced route runner, would be a day one ready to go. He's an early declare, young guy. I think he'd be one immediate production. Dalen Everett, corner out of Georgia, there's a need there. I mean, for him to be a 9.88 relative athletic score, guy that can run in the 4.3s, can speak on my time at the Senior Bowl and having interviewed him there. As well proportionally built a corner as there is in this class. Every bit of 6'1", 190, very filled out all the way. Has seen his best football in the biggest games. I mean, SEC championships, national championship, the college football playoffs, things of those along those likes is when he's played his best. And like I said, sub 4.4 at that size, a local product. IMG recruit who played there and at Georgia. He's as well coached as any prospect in this class. I'd throw him out there. I think between those three and what you see on the rest of the board, receivers an obvious need, corners an obvious need. I think the depth in terms of anticipating where we could be looking in the fourth, I'd rather take my odds with the receivers. I'm going to go with Dalen Everett, corner out of Georgia here to be at that corner 2 spot opposite of AJ Terrell in a room where you're seeing what you have out of Kobe Bryant. You're kind of wrapping up the Mike Hughes experience. I think that's one to not play the board as much as receiver. And we'll see if I eat my words on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the receiver, like Antonio, I love Antonio Williams. I think he's a really good prospect, especially in these middle rounds in a weaker wide receiver class overall. He's a guy that I find myself targeting for a lot of teams in those middle rounds, but Everett makes a lot of sense for the Falcons. They need speed, like it's some guy on the outside that can match other guys' speed. And like he's that type of player. And the production at Georgia speaks for itself. I know our stats were a little off there with 0 tackles, but the 10 passes defended is legit work from him. And that's playing against the best competition in college football.
Really the only ding you're going to get from people naysaying Everett is, he can be a little bit of a victim of the dink and dunk and some off zone coverage. Will run a lot of that in Atlanta. But a lot of that was just schematically in Athens, but never going to give up the big play kind of guy. Would be interested to see Jeff Ulbricht's altering of that, getting into his building. But outside of that, he's got a complete profile you're looking for.
Yeah, I love it too. Kind of looking at this board. We're gonna get frisky here. Are there any positions? Let's go take a look at the wide receiver to start because we kind of talked about that. Here's some of the options available at wide receiver right now. Are there any guys in this grouping in round 4 that you would be interested in, or you think maybe it would be a reach to go target some of these guys in this spot?
Yeah. Scroll it down just a hair, just because I had one name in particular in mind. Yeah, he must be gone. The name that I was thinking of right there that I think can get to 122. I'm used to saying 114 now that we've made the Sidney Brown swap. It's 122. That would have been Mississippi State wide receiver Brennan Thompson, 5'9", 164. And you hear those and you think one trick pony as a sub 4.3, but he's a great route runner. He's tough as hell over the middle of the field. I think he's exactly what they could be looking for. He's gone in this situation. I tell you, flip back to the overall board, and then I'll know who I would go with here. Man, they've got at center, they've got Ryan Newsel, who started all of last year after Drew Dahlman leaving town. They go add Corey Levin from Tennessee at a depth spot there. So I think between those two, they have their plan at center next to an all-pro and Chris Lindstrom, multi-year starter, and Matthew Bergeron. But, man, I'll tell you, Jake Slaughter would be a great fit. I interviewed him at the Senior Bowl as well. Real good discussion about the potential to play for Bill Callahan, offensive line coach of the Falcons. Very versatile in terms of a gap scheme or that wide zone we're more typical to in Atlanta. Very intelligent. He's as smart a player in this class. Very well built, experienced. If I weren't confident that that's their plan as far as those two centers, because, let's say Newsel's the starter and Levin's the backup. That's a damn good center backup.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's what they would do here with limited picks. But, man, if they weren't confident in that and he was sitting there, that'd be a perfect fit. But having said that, I think by this point, you don't need to push the receiver much further. I take Desan Stribling out of Ole Miss. 6'2", 207. He's the best blocking receiver in this class. Pair that with Drake London, who's the best blocking receiver in the NFL. You're a cornerback going against these two.
That's downfield, a physical group right there.
You don't stand a damn chance, man. You just don't. You don't. And the amount of experience, 56 starts between his time at Mississippi. Was it Mississippi State? I'd have to fact check that. One school, then Oklahoma State, and then lastly Ole Miss. Productive as hell. He's been a riser in this whole process. Goes and runs a sub 4.4 at the combine. I think when you put that complete profile together to throw him in a receiver 2, receiver 3 role, that's money.
I truly feel like the Falcons in their first 3 picks are going to have to go wide receiver. Like, unless
Well, that's
they
one reason we did there. Yeah,
yeah,
I couldn't justify waiting, particularly like we said earlier, we don't have a fifth rounder.
yeah. So, like, I think as far as, like, the free agent market itself goes, like, I mean, there's some veterans out there that can make an impact or whatever, but they need some upside options outside of Drake London. They've kinda Darnell Mooney wasn't healthy a lot of the time next to London. You never really got a true pairing there. And they I just think they need somebody young, a young receiver that they can develop over the course of a few years behind Drake London to where they have a answer next to him long term versus plug and play veterans. And, if they don't love the first 3 rounds, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to, plug and play it one more year, figure it out with a veteran, maybe like a Debo Samuel, a Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, if he's legally going to be able to play. Like, who knows what they do at the receiver position. But if they don't go the veteran route, it almost feels like wide receiver is a necessity in those first 3 rounds.
Oh man, what a snipe by the Eagles at 215. I would have taken Caleb Elam's or
Yeah.
at a TCU. That was my thought process. Was really, really impressed with him at the Senior Bowl. Uh, a guy that hit 20 plus miles an hour, 6'2", 234. One
It's
of
a
my
tank
best
right there.
one of my best clips I shot there was him absolutely mowing Seth McGowan in a pass block drill about like grass and a lawnmower. It, that would have been an easy one there. So it's actually kind of interesting having mentioned that they stiffed me a little bit. I would look at the remaining linebackers and the running backs.
So at the linebacker position, you got some interesting names in this group. Justin Jefferson from Alabama, not the wide receiver, the linebacker is one guy I look at in this group that is intriguing for me. Is there anybody on this list that's intriguing for you in this linebacker group here at
Owen
the end?
Heineke is, but I'll tell you, we got to see if he even ends up here. He's filed with the NCAA trying to get another year. He's had a really strong pre-draft. I thought he had as good of an on-field workout as anybody in the group at the combine. Really productive young player, but that's one we'll have to see. Flip it over to the running backs real quick.
Roman Hemby's a guy that's interesting.
Let's do Roman Hemby
Yeah.
there. That's who I would have gone with before you mentioned him. To be in that pairing out of Indiana, both 1,000+ yard running backs, spent the majority of his college time at Maryland. He's got some size to him. We're coming off of letting Tyler Algier walk in free agency to the Cardinals. This running back, too, that's coming into somebody, it's like, dude, you got Bijan Robinson ahead of you. I think in that kind of committee role with running back 2 expectations and his size profile in the 6th round, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's the guy they need. Like, if they're not gonna, I don't think they need to like target running back by any means in the draft, but they need to address what they're gonna do behind Bijan because yes, they can be as reliant on Bijan as possible, but it's nice knowing you have a guy developing at least behind him or an upside option that will take some of the work off of Bijan Robinson, this season, like they've had in the past with Tyler Algier. All right,
They kind
next
of made
pick.
this easy for me. We were just talking about Owen Heineke, and he's still there. Let's go with Heineke, linebacker out of
Let's do
Oklahoma.
it.
That's a competent body for a 7th round price. Like I said, they've already had the additions of Christian Harris, Channing Tindall, sub 4.4 kind of speed guys, sub 4.5 kind of speed guys. That profile that Cunningham's kind of leaning more on. That's just a productive player to throw in there and round it out, having addressed some of every need. I think if you showed that class like I will afterward, the Falcons fan base, they'd say it's an absolute win.
Yeah, I think they address a lot of their needs in terms of, like you mentioned this, they need more depth on this roster and they need to be able to fill out the entire roster. This is exactly what this draft class does. Caleb Banks, you have a top 15 upside pick in that 2nd round. Outside of that, you're getting high upside athletic players at different positions that are going to mold well, I think, with what they're trying to do in Atlanta. Obviously, with Stefanski coming over, they're going to have a little bit different of a style than they've been accustomed to in the past. And I'm hoping that, Stribling can be this guy that can step in alongside Drake London, be an explosive playmaker. They just need another guy next to London. I think with this draft class, we're going to be in a really, really good spot. Well, Clint, if you had to grade it out of A to F, what would you grade that draft class?
I'd say you can maybe go A minus, B plus. The only reason I say that is would have liked to have had a traditional nose tackle along the lines, maybe like a Dominic Orange out of Iowa State,
Lee
who played the
Hunter, if he
most
somehow
snaps there.
falls.
Exactly. Yeah. I would maybe say that. Beyond it, you got somebody in that defensive line rotation. You got somebody with corner 2 upside. You got somebody with receiver 2 upside and a receiver 3 floor. You got a running back 2, and you got a linebacker to throw in a young rotation with a lot of athleticism. To have limited picks, I think that's about as good as we could have done. But yeah, I mean, I would just have the nuance of maybe wanting a traditional nose tackle, but the Falcons aren't going to get everything they want with these few picks and picking this later on in the draft. You went with best player available in most all those spots.
Yeah, that's what you got to do when the picks are limited and you're drafting in the second round with your first pick. I think we crushed it here. I think we did a great job. Make sure you guys drop a follow for Clint. Drop a comment down below what you think of our Falcons draft class and hit that subscribe button for more Blitz Sports Media content. We will catch you guys next time.